Hello, today I'm going to paint a cottage, rocks and the sea. Let's get started. Well, it's going to be nice and simple today. A simple painting without any frills really. There's going to be a cottage, rocks, the sea, the sand, cliffs, all that kind of thing, all going to be included there, but I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I possibly can. And we're going to even have a splashing wave crashing up against the rock. So I'm going to start off with masking fluid, pouring a little bit into a container. I got the container free actually at Christmas. It originally had trifle in it. Turned out to be very useful. So you dip a brush into the masking fluid and paint over the area that you want to preserve the white for. In this case I'm painting in little spray droplets, the sea as the wave hits the shore, and odd little marks here and there. Now painting the sky with plain water. Always a good start when you're painting the sky is cover it all with water first. Gives you a much better finish. And I'm going to use cobalt blue, a very strong mix, because I'm going to put clouds into the sky using kitchen roll. So you need a good strong paint in order for that to work really well. So the darkest part of the sky is going to be near the top. Work my way down to the horizon. On the left-hand side, just above the cliffs, I'm deliberately leaving a little unpainted area, which it's just something I do occasionally. I'll be coming back to it towards the ending of the painting of the sky to put in distant clouds. Ordinary kitchen roll over a finger and start to dab out the shape of clouds. Big clouds on the left, which is nearest to us, and then I'm gradually reducing the clouds in size as they go towards the horizon and the far distance. All part of perspective and trying to follow the lines of perspective, even with clouds, of course. Well, especially with clouds. Well, especially with anything, really, when it comes to perspective, but it would include clouds. That seems to be okay. Quite happy with that. That's fine. So I'll leave that as it is. Now I'm going to the little bit of sky that I left unpainted, and what I've done, I've dipped my brush into water to give a very weak mixture of the cobalt blue, and then I do the same thing again. I dab out clouds, and it just another way of getting distant clouds on the horizon. And now the sea. Using French ultramarine blue, a very strong mix towards the front. A very strong mix. Being careful to paint round the rocks. Keeping a fairly even mix across the left-hand side, and allowing it to taper to the right-hand side. Now I've dipped my brush into water to give me a pretty weak mix of the ultramarine blue, and then finished off the sea area, which gives me two colours, it being much lighter in the distance. So there is a distinct difference between the sea closer and the sea further away. then into the undiluted strong ultramarine blue and putting a few marks into the weaker area. When it dries, it looks quite convincing when you do that sort of thing. Now into yellow ochre and painting the tops, the grassy areas of the distant cliffs. It adds a bit of interest to the distant cliffs, but not too much so that it draws attention to itself. They are green rather than yellow, but started with yellow ochre, then a dip into the cobalt blue, go over it, and it gives me a grey-green colour. Try to keep the colours not too strong and distinct in the distance. Colours in the distance are always, of course, compared to the foreground, they're much greyer, less contrast. Now using yellow ochre again, this time to paint the beach, the sandy area. Very weak mixture, very watery. If you start off with a weak mixture, I always reckon that's the best way, because you can always go back over it again when it's dry and strengthen it. Putting in distant beaches, little touches that all help to make the painting convincing. Just little flicks of yellow ochre, nice and simple. And now burnt umber, which have combined with the yellow ochre. Very, very watery indeed. As watery really as I can make it. And I'm using that to paint the cliff face. The cliff face, most people would describe it as white, but it's nearly white, so it's now off-white by adding this watered down mix of burnt umber. Now strengthening that mix to paint the rocks in the middle ground. They're a little bit stronger in colour because they're nearer, of course. I'll be painting over these again later. These are the initial washes, just to get started. In watercolour, it very often is a case of building up a successive layer of washes. Once all the white of the paper has been painted over, it makes judging tones a lot easier. Trying to restrict the number of colours I use too, sort of what they call a restricted palette. And all helps to give the picture some harmony. I've got a grey there, which I'm using to paint the water from the sea as it laps up the beach. Oddly enough, if I used ultramarine blue there, it wouldn't look right. Grey seems to suit it much better. And now a bit of a clean up. What would we do without kitchen roll? So useful. It really is. Cobalt blue. And light red, which gives a warm grey. Much watered down again, as watery as I can make it, just about. And I'm going to paint the house with that. I could have left the house white, I suppose, but I wanted to put some colour in there. A good substitute for grey paint is dirty paint water, as long as it's not tinted bright red or, lime green or something like that. It's very useful for painting white objects. Dirty water. And now back into the rocks again. What I'm going to do is gradually build up the colour of the rocks, adding an extra colour on each time it dries, until we reach the point where I'm happy that the rocks are dark enough. Cadmium red and burnt sienna, which again I'm going to water well down, and using this colour to paint the roof of the cottage. They do say it's always a good idea to get something painted red in every picture. I'm inclined to agree with that. Keeping everything as simple as possible. A simple red roof with no added texture. It is in the middle distance, so it's not very close. So I don't necessarily need to add any distinguishing textural marks like tiles, that sort of thing. There is a cliff, sloping ground that comes down to the beach, and I've painted that with a green, dabbing strokes to give the impression of vegetation growing. Again, fairly simple, just sort of dabbing away. It will be instantly recognisable to a viewer as vegetation. Back to the rocks again, another coat, increasingly darkening the rocks. Although painting very loosely, I'm still trying to sort of shape the rocks with the brush strokes. Starting to take shape as we apply all the colours. Painting the midground rocks. Looking at it and thinking about it, the cottage is in an ideal spot, it seems to me. By the beach, close to the sea, rocks, sun, sand. Perfect, really. Be a great place to go for the weekend or a week. Wonderful, really. A sort of an escape. Daily walks along the beach and along the cliff paths, that sort of thing. Fresh air. You can imagine it, can't you? Go down to the village every now and again. If there's a village nearby, I imagine there will be. Of course, there'll be a pub there, won't there? So you could pop in there. And if we're very lucky, we might find there's a chip shop in there too. Putting on the chimney pots using Payne's grey. I'm now painting one side of the windows using the Payne's grey and dabbing it out a little bit. Not much detail, keeping it all nice and simple. Similar job with the other windows. The doorway to the cottage, at this stage, I was a bit undecided about what colour to make the door, but later on I did make it grey again. And then adding a blue into the window. That's to show that the window is reflecting either sunlight or the sea. A two-tone window is nearly always effective. One side dark, the other side blue. It works every time. Back to the rocks with an ever-increasing dark paint. The darkest darks will be the closest to us, to the front of the picture. And of course, conversely, the further away, the lighter the darks. And similar treatment to the mid-ground rocks. No detail, of course, just shadows, that sort of thing. Little marks to shape it. Just decided to put a nondescript grey paint on the doorway. Probably wouldn't be a good idea to have a doorway competing with the red roof. I'm using permanent rose here. I've got a little patch of permanent rose on my palette, which I'm decided to use to dot in flowers, blooms in the cottage garden. And more of the same for the rocks. And of course, all these layers of paint, the dark paint dries lighter by about 30%. So there is a bit of a ongoing need to keep adding paint until you reach the right level of colour and darkness. Time for a clean-up. Burnt umber, ultramarine. It's time to paint in the final shadows. Ultramarine and burnt umber, of course, are both transparent. Little shadow under the eaves. And they will dry a little bit lighter, of course, like everything else. Putting a few shadows in here and there. It's a beautiful summer's day. And now putting in the green foliage of the plants in the cottage garden. Nice place to be on a summer's day. You can sort of imagine the sound of the waves and the cries of the seagulls overhead. Time for a bit of splatter. This is where you can practice being a rock drummer. I was in a rock band in the 60s and the 70s, but I didn't play drums, I played guitar. But doing splatter makes up for it. I think that's just about enough there, I think. The whole purpose of this painting really is to show and create a very, very simple painting of the coast and a cottage. You can always add to it, you know, if you decide to paint anything like this. For instance, in the bay, we could have put a couple of triangles, which would have been sailboats, that sort of thing. Seagulls in the sky. Something at the front, some foliage. Now rubbed off the masking tape, and just needs a little bit of paint. I'm using cobalt, very watered down cobalt, just a dab in a few marks, shadow marks, in the water as the wave hits the rocks, making a bit of a splash. Not much else we can do. I think we've reached the end of the painting. That looks fine to me. Remove the masking tape. Always looks better when you've got a frame round a picture. And there it is. Finished. Hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed painting it. Please leave a thumbs up, a like if you would. I would appreciate that very much indeed. And subscribe if you've not already subscribed. Well, I'm looking forward to the next time. So until then, thanks again, and bye for now.